This is Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Lamed Hey. And today's shir has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf who's been together with us, I think, almost from the beginning. Lezecher Nishmas, his mother's yahrzeit, which is going to be tomorrow in Yud Aleph Nisan. The learning of the entire Chabura should be an incredible schos ilu neshama for Miriam Bas Eliezer Akaye Nemir Hashem. The learning of the entire Chabura of Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam should bring Miriam Bas Eliezer Akaye's neshama to a higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. Learning should bring an incredible schos Yeshuas and Shadochim for Yisrael Chaim and Devarim Tamar Sima Bas Pararach Shlomo Lebizava Vivendeli Shem and Chaya Blumo Yudis Bas Sima Malka, as well as those schos for Rosh Hashanah of Shal Yisrael and your favorite Shmo Ben Tilal Dazim Echlez and Acham Bas Yuvas Blumas Bindol Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Malka Moshe Ben Beila Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Malka, Bas Sheva Feigu Bashir Chana Besoich Shar Choyle Yisrael. We're picking it up on the bottom of Lamed Dalet Amud Beis. We are 4 lines from the Y line. The first word line is Amar Shmuel, 6 lines to the bottom of the Amud. This goes back to the din of the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah taught us a case where Reuven and Shimon married the wrong wives, and the Mishnah said, what do they have to do? They have to wait 3 months in order to make sure that the woman in which they were with did not become pregnant. Yesterday we dealt with the fact, wait, they're only together one time, you should not be able to have a child in that first act of intercourse, in which the Gemara answered, no, they were together multiple times, and we got into a lengthy discussion whether this rule is true, and we learned a very important rule that has to do with Dam Bisulim, that if a woman has Dam Bisulim, that's when Einisha Misaberes would be a Rishayna, but if not, then she could become pregnant. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, B'kulan Tzrichas La'amtim Shloisha Chadashim, and all of them, not only the cases in our Mishnah, we're going to get to Mirz Hashem in about a week's time on Daf Mem Aleph. We're going to discuss anytime a woman gets divorced, anytime a woman's husband dies, she can't get remarried for 3 months. Says Shmuel, Kul on all these women before getting remarried, except for a girl who became a ger, or a girl that was a slave and was freed, both when they were a ketana. So if a girl becomes a geoires as a ketana, or it's freed from being a slave as a ketana, then she is allowed to get remarried right away. She does not have to wait 3 months. Explains the Gemara, based on the din of Shmuel, what do we see? Let's say it wasn't a geoires, it wasn't an shivcha neved, but rather it was a regular Bas Yisrael that is a kitana, and her husband dies, or she gets divorced, then it seems like she has to wait 3 months. Explains the Gemara, what's this case going to be of a kitana that's going to require to be waiting 3 months before getting remarried? Ubimai, ibimion, if you're going to tell me that she was a kitana, kedushin of a kitana, she's allowed to just walk out of the marriage and do mion. Farmer Shmuel Delabaya, Shmuel holds that such a girl does not have to wait 3 months if she does mean. V begat, 2 lines on the bottom. And if you're going to tell me the case is that she got divorced, she received a get, Vamer Shmuel, Chadas in the Shmuel already taught us, Vamer Shmuel, Mia Naboy, in the Svichalam Tegim Chadashim, Nosala get, Svichalam Tegim Chadashim. We already know that din of Shmuel. So explains the Gemara, so what must the din of Shmuel be, in which he's telling us that only a Gioiris and a Mishachreres, a woman that becomes a Jew or gets freed as a Ketana, then they do not have to wait 3 months, but a regular Ketana would, yes. What must the case be? Ella biznos. The case must be talking about a woman who was mizana. As we turn over to Lamed Hey Amid Aleph, v'gazur rabana Ketana misham gedayla, and the reason in which she's going to have to wait, as the Tab Rashi points out, is that she is a regular Jew, so they have a gezerah because of a gedayla. But Rashi says by Giyaires, there's going to be no gezerah. Why not? Because it is not common. And that Rashi, those 2 words of leishchicha, which of course that is the general rule that we don't make gezeras derabanan in cases that are not common, are important rules, because we're about to see a bit of a lengthy discussion where this gezerah will apply and where this gezerah will not apply. Says the Gemara, Migas Rinon, and do we make a gezerah ketana misham gedela? Do we make such a decree? But tonight we learned in the Mishnah. We learned in a Mishnah 2 days ago that if they were ketanos who were not able to have children, they're allowed to get remarried right away. In our case of the husbands who married the wrong wives, if the wives were a ketana, said that Mishnah, boom, get right away remarried, don't have to wait 3 months. What happened to the gezerah that we should make gezerah of a ketana due to a gedayla? Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav Ha'isa. That Mishnah was special. Explains the Gemara, really? If you're telling me it was a one-time dispensation, a one-time rule that could get remarried, sounds like it was a real story. It was a story that the Mishnah said, okay, in this case, get remarried. But ask the Gemara, what do you mean? As Rashi points out, 3 lines on the top. Excuse me, no, I read the wrong Rashi. Let's go back. Let's undo that. Says Rashi, 2 lines on the top. That the case happened. The words of the Mishnah don't seem that it was an actual story. It said 2 people that get married. Sounds like any time it could happen. Not that there was one specific instance. Explains the Gemara. No, the Mishnah mean is like a special rule. Because such a case like our Mishnah is not a normal case. It's not normal for Reuven to do Kedusha to Rachel, Shimon to Leah, and then when it comes to Nesuin, Kenisas L'chapa, to marry the wrong girl. Because it's not normal, that's why there's no Gzeira in the Mishnah. So the Gemara is sticking to the guns that really in a regular case of a Ketana, she would have to wait 3 months. Why? Gzeira. But our Mishnah is different because the Mishnah of marrying the wrong woman is quite an uncommon scenario. Lishna Achrina, says the Gemara, another Lashain had to learn this din of Shmuel. Amrulei. They Lishna Achrina Amrulei Amr Shmuel Kulan Tzrichas Antim Shalish Chadashim Chutz Miyeris Mishras Gedayla. In this case, Shmuel says, who doesn't have to wait 3 months? Either a Giyaris or a woman that becomes freed, even when she's a Gedayla. Aval Ketana Bas Yisrael Ein Zichlan Gimel Chadashim. But the inference is a Ketana will never have to wait 3 months. Explains the Gemara again. Bimai, what's the case? Ibimiyon Amr Shmuel Chadazimna. We already knew this thing that a Ketana that does Miyon does not have to wait 3 months. Beget, but Shmuel taught us that if a woman, a ketana, gets a get, she has to wait 3 months. And you're telling me a ketana never has to wait. So what is this din of Shmuel? Explains the Gemara, Ela biznos, that's when she will not have to wait 3 months. And because it's not common, therefore there's no gezerah, but therefore it's not common to have a case of zinos, and therefore there is no gezerah of such a ketana that she has to wait 3 months. Ask the Gemara 1 second. If there's a case of a woman who becomes a ger, or a woman that gets freed, even when she's a gedayla, they certainly are common to have zinos, because she was a guy last week. She was a shivcha last week. Very common to have zinos. So therefore, ligzar, we should make a gzeira that they should have to wait 3 months. So why, according to this Lashon Shmuel teaching us, they do not? Explains the Gemara. This is a case in which that we will get to in Ksubis. If we have a geiris or shvu or shivcha that became redeemed, that became a ger or became freed, what's the halacha? Says the Brisa, Srichas Dante Gimel Chadashim Tivi Reb Yehuda, like we just suggested. Why? Because the shchichi bo zinos, therefore they have to wait 3 months, make sure they're not pregnant. But Rav Yosi disagrees, and Rav Yosi says there's no such a gzeira on them, and they're allowed to get married right away. So our din of Shmuel is going with Rav Yosi, that we're allowing them to get remarried right away, even though it's shchichi bo zinos, they're still allowed to get married right away. But now the Gemara wants to know, what is the sheet of Rav Yosi? Why exactly are we allowing them to get married right away? Amar Rabba, my time with Rav Yosi, and this is a discussion that we'll deal with extensively in the Gemara in Ksubis. Says Rabba, where did Rav Yosi come from? Explains the Gemara, says the Gemara, no, anytime a woman is mizaneh, she doesn't want to have a child from a Maisa Zinos, therefore, what does she do? she is mezana b'moich. She puts a pad or something inside of her in order to absorb whatever the zera comes in, so she doesn't become pregnant. And that's why Rav Yasi says she doesn't have to wait 3 months, because we know she's not going to become pregnant because she's mezana b'moich. I understand. There's a guy. She's planning on becoming a yid. So her, when she is mizanek, since she knows she's going to become a yid, therefore, what does she do? She guards herself. She knows that she doesn't want to have a child right now. She's about to become a yid. That makes sense. A woman who's captured, a woman who's a maidservant as well. She also makes sense that she'll do such a thing. Why? Because why? Because she hears from her master that she's going to be redeemed, she's going to be freed very soon, and therefore mintra nafshayu, and therefore she protects herself, and therefore she makes sure to be mishameshes b'moich. She makes sure, even though she might be mezana, we're not saying she won't be mezana. She'll be mezana, but she'll be careful. She doesn't want to have a child right now. But there are other cases in which a slave goes free if the master knocks at her to their eye. So in those cases, ask the Gemara, how could Rabbi Yossi say a rule that any time a woman, a maidservant, is freed, is emancipated, in any of these cases, you don't have to wait 3 months? Why? She's not necessarily going to be Meshes B'moich. She wasn't anticipating her freedom. Maybe you'll suggest, as the Gemara, maybe Rabbi Yossi will admit in any case where it's Mimela, it's not planned, like a case of Shein and Ayin. Rabbi Yossi, you're right. In those cases, you should wait 3 months. But it's not true. We learned in a Mishnah. Then Rabbi Yossi says, even in Anusa, which certainly wasn't planned, no woman plans on getting raped, plans on someone forcibly violating her. Therefore, and yet Rabbi Yossi says she can get married right away. Why? What happened to the price of Havchana? Havchana is that time that you have to wait the 3 months to make sure that she's not pregnant. Elamar Abaye explains, Abaye Isha Mizaneh Misapeche Shloi Tisader. Saber says, Abaye, even when it's unplanned, even when one is unfortunately ma'anest, one is a slave and she has no reason of thinking she's going to be freed, the next day happens to be the master knocked at her eye in her tooth, still Rabbi Yossi holds there's no concern she'll have a baby. Why not? Because after the tashmish, you know what she does after this? No, she's mizafecha, she turns over, she lets all the zera come out of her because she does not want to have a baby. So even if it was unplanned, she did not necessarily have this mic with her, she did not necessarily have the birth control with her, still she makes sure to do something that she does not become pregnant. Ve'edach, says Gemara, beautiful svara. So what about those who argue in Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yehuda explains the Gemara, Yafa, he's nervous, maybe she didn't turn herself over, maybe she didn't clean herself out 100%. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda requires her to wait the 3 months. And we conclude the Parek, the Mishnah said, the Mishnah concluded that if they were daughters of Kohanim, then, and this is the case again, that Reuven married Shimon's wife and Shimon married Reuven's wife, then what happens? They're puzzled from Kahuna. Asks the Gemara, Kahana is in Yisraelus Lai. It sounds like from the Mishnah only daughters of Kahanim are puzzled, but not daughters of Yisraelim. But ask the Gemara, why is that true? Even a daughter of a Yisrael, if they're going to marry a Kohen, they should also be puzzled from this Maisa Zunos. Ema explains the Gemara, Nishei Kahanim. Say it means if they were wives of Kohanim, then they're usher to their husbands from the fact that they were mezaneh. Explains the Gemara again, Nishei Kohanim in Nishei Yisraelim Lai. But if they were married to Yisrael, not Va'amar Rav Amram Milsa HaMilsa Amar Rav Shisha's taught us the following: Va'anrinu la'ininu mimasnitan, and we went and we looked into it from our Mishnah. Eishes Yisrael Shenensa, a wife of a Yisrael that is ma'anis, that so enforcefully violates her, afal pi shamutaris labayla. It's true the din of asr labal and asr labayel is only when it's a consensual act, and here it was not, therefore she's mutaris labayla, but Psula Kuna. The Psul to Kuna has nothing to do with whether there was consent or not. The Psul to Kuna is because she was Mizaneh. So even if it's a woman who's married to Israel, she still should be Aser to a Kayin. Amar Rabba Yerai, Tachi Kamar, Amaya Kayhanos, Nisuais, Li Israel. If there were daughters of Kahana married to Yisraelim, then what is possible? Nifsu menat truma nevena shayu. They're possible for eating truma from their father's household, which normally they're allowed to, but here because they were mezana, they're not going to be allowed to. Hadron aloch arba achen. We have to do an incredible chazara of this parak, this third parak of Yevamos, Arba Achin, a long and lengthy, perhaps at times a very difficult parak, as is true with much of Yevamos. But let's begin the next parak, or the fourth parak, B'siyata Dishmaya. Says in the Mishnah, HaChoyleit liyevimtoi v'nimsa mu'beres v'yolda. Now, this really is a direct continuation of the previous parak. We just finished discussing this process, this time you have to wait in order to ensure a woman is not pregnant. And now we have another halacha. We know that Yibam, Chalitza, all the way back from Daf Beis, only is applicable when the brother dies without a child. That's the Aleph Beis of all Yibam and Chalitza. If a brother dies with a child, of course there's no Yibam and Chalitza. So generally, what do you have to do? After the brother dies, you have to wait 3 months. You have to wait 3 months to ensure that his wife or any of the wives, I should say, are not pregnant. Because if one of them were to have a child, there's no yibum, there's no chalitza. And let's just point out, if they were to do chalitza, what did you do already? Tied on a shoe, you spit, no big deal. But if you do yibum, that's a very big deal. Because if one does yibum to a woman in which has a child, there was no chi of yibum. When there's no chi of yibum, that's it is a daraisa. That's ishes ach, that's your brother's wife. You're not allowed to marry your brother's wife. We spoke out all the way back in the beginning of the Masechta. That's a special chiddush of yibum that allows one to marry the ishes ach. But if there's no yibum because there's a child, of course it's forbidden. So generally you have to wait 3 months. But what happens, our parak begins with a discussion, what if you did not wait the requisite 3 months? If someone does chalitza to the Yevama, v'nim says mubaris, and after the chalitza finds out that she is indeed pregnant of a yolda, and indeed she gives birth, bizman shavlad shel kayamahu, and the child that she gives birth to is a good, viable child, which means what? There was no chi of yibum, there was no chi of chalitza, and therefore the chalitza was nothing. But if there's no chi of chalitza and yibum, there's another din. Mutares b'krayv ha'isel, v'mutares b'krayv hav. Normally, when they do chalitza, when Reuven does chalitza to Rachel, now he severs himself from Rachel. He can marry anyone else, but he's usher to Rachel's immediate relatives. He's usher to Rachel's immediate relatives like a grusha. So says the Mishnah, but if she were to have a child, and there was really no chalitza, so what did Reuven do to Rachel? Nothing. He put on a shoe and he spit. Nothing was really done. Therefore, there's not going to be that isser. He's mutter to relatives and she's mutter his relatives, and similarly, generally a chalutza, a woman who has chalitza is usher to marry a kohen. Here she's mutter to marry a kohen. But let's say she's pregnant and the child that gives birth is not a viable child. Either it dies within 30 days or it's a nefel, it's a miscarriage. What's the halacha? That child has a halachic status of not a child. Then who usher b'krayv esav, yasser b'krayv av. Then the chalitza was a full-fledged chalitza, and therefore what? He is usher to her relatives and she is usher to his relatives. Ubaslam and akuna, there's a psul kuna. Case A of the Mishnah of chalitza. Case B of the Mishnah, ha-koine says yevimtoi. Someone doesn't wait the 3 months and he marries the Yevama. He does a ma'aseh tashmish, he does a ma'aseh yibum. And then unfortunately, v'nim samu beres the olda, and she's pregnant and she gives birth from the first husband. Bizman shavlat shel kiyamav, who's a good child. What does that mean? That means that this man just slept with his ishes ach, with his brother's wife, which is forbidden to him. Yoitzi must divorce her, and the chayav and karban, he has to bring a karban. Why? Because he just did a dreadful aveira. V'vein v'lat shel kiyama. If let's say the child was not a good child, meaning not a good child, excuse me, the child was not a viable child, who's a nefel, then yekayim. Then the Yibam is a good ma'aseh Yibam, they stay married. And that is the case of Yibam. And the Mishnah concludes, Safek, the child's born, and you don't know whose child it is. Why? Because the child is born after 7 months after the Yibum. So maybe it's a 9-month baby from the first brother, maybe it's a 7-month baby of the second brother. You do not know. What's the halacha? Yaitzi, they must get divorced, but vavalad kosher. The child's a kosher. But they have to bring a carbon ashav tali, which anytime you're not sure if there's an aveira, that's what you bring. So says the Gemara, Itmar, we learned that If someone performs chalitza, which really is the case almost of our Mishnah, and the woman was pregnant, v'pila, and she miscarried, what is the halacha in such a case? Is chalitza to a pregnant woman a good chalitza or not? Says the Gemara to Machlekes Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan meinos chalitza menachem. She does not need a new chalitza from the brothers. Why? Because the fact that she was pregnant is irrelevant because it ended up in a miscarriage, and therefore the chalitza was a good chalitza. Reish Lakish Amar chalitza menachem. She still needs chalitza, and the Gemara explains. Rav Yochanan Amar chalitza menachem. Why chalitza mubar shema chalitza? It's a good chalitza, bias mubaresh ma biya. And similarly, if someone would sleep with a mubaris, as someone would do a ma'aseh yibum, that also would be a good ma'aseh yibum. No, you need a new chalitza. Chalitza mubaris lo shema chalitza, bias mubaris lo shema. Says the Gemara, what is this machlekes Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish? What's at the crux? What are they arguing about? Two ways of learning. Either you can tell me that they're arguing misvara logic. What would happen? Let's say right before they got together, Eliyahu say, by the way, this woman's pregnant, but by the way, the child's nothing. She's gonna miscarriage. He says, Rav Yochanan, would you tell me you can't do Yima Chalitza? He told you that there's no baby, that it's an Eiffel. Of course you could. Hashanami so too you can do it now, because retroactively you know that the baby was nothing. We don't say such a thing. We don't go with Eliyahu Navi. We don't go with retroactive clarifications. Lamaisa, she's pregnant. Lamaisa, the chalitza is nothing. That's the first way of learning. The second way of learning is a pasuk. It says, when is there yibum and chalitza when there's no child? It says, was there a child? No, it was an Eiffel. Beautiful. You have to look into it. So before we go into the questions back and forth of Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, let's just see the machlekes here played out. Okay, this is explaining the dinim in the Mishnah very, very nicely. As always. Here you see the second din of the Mishnah, and here we have it. It's marachas mubaris ve'pila. Rav Yochanan says ein no tzrich chalitza v'nachim because it's a good chalitza. It could be a Reish Lakish says you need a chalitza. Why? Because chalitza and bia mubaris is not a good chalitza. And the Gemara just explained to us is two sibas, two reasons for their machlekes. Either it's a svara or it's a pasuk. Either it's a svara, the Rabbi Yochanan says, Megala milsel mafreya. We realize that she was not quote unquote really pregnant. She was pregnant, but there was no baby, and therefore the Yiva chalitza is good. Or ubeni loy, she has no child. Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish says, no, we don't look retroactively. And what's ubeni loy? It's not lemaisa does she have a child. It's beni lo me'ayin alav. Look into her. It's a different din in which we have seen. So let's begin the Gemara, in which we're going to have a classical game of Gemara ping-pong between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish as they go back and forth, asking kashas. And of course, the crux is going to be our Mishnah, whether our Mishnah could be a raya or not. So Eisvei were 4 lines to the wide lines of Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish that said, chalitza and Yibam Mubares is nothing, is asked by Rav Yochanan. What did our Mishnah say? The first part of the Mishnah said that if the child is not viable, who aser b'kroi v'isal, the aser b'kroi vav. If the child is not viable, then what happens? Then the Yavam is aser to relatives, because that means that the chalitza was a good chalitza, and the halacha is that when you do chalitza, you're not allowed to marry the relatives. Ubasla min hakuna. So says Rav Yochanan, bishlam l'didida min chalitza mubar shma chalitza. I hold that when you do chalitza to mubaris, it's a good chalitza. It makes sense. Mushamachi basla. I understand why she's basla to kuna, because they did a chalitza. The chalitza was done while she was pregnant. Who cares? I hold it's a good chalitza. But according to Reish Lakish, Reish Lakish hold that the chalitza of a pregnant woman is nothing. Why, when we see that the child was not a viable child, is she basla from kuna? Amar le, Reish Lakish answers, midrabanan l'chomer ba'alma. Really, says Reish Lakish, you're right. She's not basla from kuna. The paslas from kuna, says Reish Lakish, is a din derabanan, and it's a chomra. Another way of learning, the exact opposite. Now Rish Lakish is going to bring the exact same raya to Rav Yochanan, the exact opposite. What did the Mishnah say if the vlad is not viable? Says Rish Lakish. It's not a good chalitza. So that's the wording of the Mishnah. Pasla min akuna. She is puzzle, which Rish Lakish says means what? L'chumra. Why did the Mishnah, according to Rav Yochanan, say something else? Why did the Mishnah hone in on the fact you don't need a subsequent chalitza from the brothers? Why did it say pasul? Says Rish Lakish, you know why? Because it's teaching me a din d'Rabbanan. But it's not like you, Rav Yochanan. According to Rav Yochanan, the Mishnah should have honed in on the detail. You don't need chalitza. Amar le Rav Yochanan responds, really, that's what the Mishnah meant. You don't need chalitza. Tani Reisha loy pasla, Tani Seifa pasla. Okay, a classical giving take. And one more for today. Eisei Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish. Again, Rav Yochanan asks Reish Lakish. The Mishnah continues, Ein avlat shel kiyama yikayim. If the child's not a good child and they did yibum, they're allowed to stay married. Says Rav Yochanan, I hold that even though she was pregnant, the act of yibum works. It makes sense. They can stay married when we realize that there was no baby. According to you, Rish Lakish, that says that the act of intercourse does not work when she is pregnant in order to affect the yibum. The Mishnah should have said you have to do another biyah. Why did the Mishnah say yikayim, stay married? No! It should say that you have to have another act of intercourse. You have to do biyah. You have to do yibam now. Explains Reish Lakish, ma yikayim. You know what yikayim in the Mishnah means? Yes, or yibam yikayim. Deloi sagi. It says Reish Lakish, that is what the Mishnah means to teach us. The Mishnah means to teach us that they have to be together again. Yaakov Yibol v'Yikayim, the law Isagi. It's not enough if they're not together. Igad Yamri. The Gemara flips it one more time. Rish Lakish to Rav Yochanan. Ein avlat shel kiyam Yikayim. They can say married. B'Ishlam Lididi says Rish Lakish Damina Chalitzu Beretz Loshma Chalitzu Biyum Beretz Loshma Biya. I hold that the act of Biya was nothing. I know they done Yikayim. They can stay married. What does it mean? Yikayim says Rish Lakish. Yaakov Yibol v'Yikayim the law Isagi. B'Lavach. They have to be together again to stay married. According to you, Rav Yochanan, according to you, Rachel, Rav Yochanan, you know what the Mishnah should have said? The Mishnah should have said, if he wants, he could give her a get. If he wants, he can stay married. Why did it say Yikayim? Explains Rav Yochanan again, Einach Hanami, Tanresha Yaiti, Taninami, Seifa, Yikayim.